Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. Today's video is featuring this beautiful new release set from Gina K Designs. This is called Birds and Magnolias. And now normally in the card making videos that we do, I kind of like glimpse over the stamping because it's pretty straightforward. But today we're actually going to concentrate on a stamping technique. Is this anything particularly special? No, not really. But it is a way to quickly stamp multiple cards and get like a 2-for-1. Now it could be 4-for-1 if you did a whole sheet, but I can't fit a whole sheet in my Misty and I need my Misty. Let's be real. So basically this is a half sheet of Nina cardstock. So it is 5.5 by 8.25. And I am going to stamp the entirety of this with the intention of, when I am done, simply cutting it in half and having 2 different card fronts. But it cuts down on the amount of stamping I have to do because parts of the stamping will actually cover both cards. The anything in the middle is going to be on the left card and the right card. So I did have to do a little bit of minimal masking for this, just because of the shapes of the branches, and I needed to hide them. I needed to hide the edge of the branch where it's cut off. And so to do that, I am using Gina's masking magic. And I didn't even have to mask the whole image. Usually it was just portions of it that I needed to just cover up so I could hide the branch behind it. So here I have one of them stamped down, and now I'm going to do the second stamping of the bird because they both face 2 different directions. This is a great stamp set to do this with. You could almost think about it like kind of like creating your own wallpaper, if you will. Like you're just creating this pattern across the entirety of it, and it doesn't have to be exactly the same. But then when you cut it, you're going to have 2 different cards. And my cards do look completely different. But this bird that I just stamped is on one card and on the other card. So for here, I knew that I was going to need to hide the third bird, little branch. And so I decided that I was going to take this time to start adding in some flowers. There are separate flowers in this set, and I just picked out a couple of them to just kind of fill my card up a little bit. The bird and the branch on its own is beautiful, but because I am, trying to create 2 card fronts, I need there to be a little bit more imagery. So that way when I cut it in half, there isn't one that just has like nothing and one that has all the things, if that makes sense. And so I just picked out a couple more magnolias, big ones, small ones, whatever I was feeling like. And then I stamped those down to kind of just fill that up. And then I'm going to go in. This is, by the way, all the same piece of masking magic. And it was already a scrap because I had already used it before. And so I just stamped this one little flower. That one little flower is going to be where I hide the next branch behind it. And so I'm just going to scoot this little bird in a way so that the edge of that branch is behind the flower, and I'm going to go all the way across. And this actually worked really well for me. So normally when I do a card that has like an ink blended background and Copic coloring, it takes me about 2 hours to do one card. And this actually ended up taking me about an hour and a half to do 2, which I was a huge fan of because I got, 2 for almost the same amount of time, actually less time. So for this one here, you can see my cardstock's kind of hanging out, and it's because I needed to stamp this bird off of the edge. This is the full-size Misty, by the way. And so when they're all together, it looks a little bit like, oh, she's got a lot of the same birds kind of repeating, which I do. I only have 2 birds that I'm working with here. But it doesn't matter because I'm going to cut them in half. And so this is a great way to do like a card set. If you wanted to give that as a gift to somebody or just create 2 different cards. They have a lot of really beautiful little script sentiments in this set. And I chose to make mine a hello friend and a thinking of you card. And then I can just keep these. They'll be good for any time. They definitely scream spring to me for sure. But I really feel like they're just, pretty pretty flowers and pretty birds that we can use just year round. And so here you can see this branch that kind of goes behind the bird. So I figured that was a good excuse to add in another flower. I want to stamp a flower behind this other bird as well, but I realized I didn't want to make a new mask. And so I'm just going to stamp these two, and then I'll move the mask over and stamp my other flower, because that flower will be completely on the first card and not at all on the second. So does it matter that I'm kind of doing the same thing? No, not really, because you're not going to see it. So yeah. So anyway, just something to think about if you have some stamp sets that you can kind of spread across like this. Birds on branches are great. And then just get that 2-for-1. So here is the full piece. I definitely could have filled in the one on the left a little bit more, but I kind of liked that I was going to have a lot of area for my blue sky. And so in addition to just cutting this in half, which was my original intention, to have a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, 2 cards that were 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, I decided that I was actually going to trim mine down just a little bit more so that I could pop them up. Otherwise, this would have been a completely full-on 1-layer card. But I decided that I wanted to pop it up and put a little bit of a ink blended background behind it, just for a little bit more added interest. So I ended up cutting the panels to be 4 by 5 1/4. And then I just picked the parts that I didn't think would be really noticeable if I cut them off. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have missed that part of the pattern. So you can certainly do whatever will work for you. I did try to pay attention, though, when I was trimming them to where I wanted my sentiment to go, to make sure that I had enough room to put in a sentiment that would make sense. So here's the 2 card fronts as they are, and we're going to do some ink blending. I had no interest, absolutely 0% interest, in cutting out masks for these to do ink blending. So I'm not gonna. Gina has ink blending brushes. She has full-size ones. I have those, which you'll see me use here in a little bit. But then she also has these littler ones. And so this little one was great for just kind of getting in there. I'm not trying to create a specific cloud look. I'm just really trying to go in there and put in some blue kind of around the edges, bringing it down and filling in those areas. I showed you the Tranquil Teal, but I didn't end up using it. I just used the Sea Glass and the Ocean Mist. And then so that way I could have a nice soft blend, which still kind of gave the illusion of some clouds in the sky, because I did have quite a bit of a white halo around my other images. But yeah, it worked really well. And then I'm going to do the same thing for my actual background panels, which are a regular A2 size, 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. So here you can see I'm bringing in that Ocean Mist just to kind of darken it up a little bit, just not in all the areas, but just in some of them, so that we have some darker, it's obviously a blue-green, I think it's beautiful, but some darker areas and some lighter areas just to create a more interesting background. So yeah, that's that. Yesterday I had posted a video and we had talked a lot about bicycles and childhood memories, and I asked you guys if I had ever told the story about the Creek Stranger. And several of you commented that you had not heard the Creek Stranger story. And so here I am with the Creek Stranger story. It sounds super creepy, but I promise you it's not. So in the video yesterday, here what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get an idea for where my colors are going to go. And I decided that it just made more sense to just hold my panel in place and kind of just add a little bit of color to the background, so that I knew after I moved the panel where to go in and add more color. I did extend it just a little bit more to the inside of the background panel, because I knew I was going to pop them up, and so I wanted to make sure when you looked at it from the side you would see the color and you wouldn't just see blank white cardstock. So that's what I'm doing here. So anyway, I told you that I had a group, it was like a group of misfits. Okay, there was a bunch of us that hung out in the neighborhood, which I think was pretty common, back in the day before the internet. And Amy was lived next door to me. She was my childhood best friend, and in fact, very funny, right? Isn't it funny how things work out? Her son is graduating high school, and so she sent me a text message and was like, "Hey, can you still make cupcakes for Daniel's graduation party?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So here we are, 40 years later, still, still being friends and doing what we can to help each other out. So plus, I know she's going to have, Daniel is her only child, and so I know she's going to have a super hard time with him going to college and her being an empty nester, which is so comical because here I am with a 1.5-year-old. Oh, life is different for all of us. Let's talk about the coloring. So I Googled, I couldn't figure out what kind of birds these were. And I think really truly they could probably be any birds. I am not a bird person, like maybe too much Alfred Hitchcock, Tippi Hedren when I was a kid. I'm not sure. I'm not really a bird person. I think that they're beautiful, but I don't want to interact with them. You know what I'm saying? Plus, I had that one that got eaten by mine didn't get eaten. My sister's got eaten. Mine survived because we're survivalists here. But like I just was never really a super bird person. But anywho, I did a little bit of Googling, and I wanted to see what kind of colors I could go with, so I started Googling colorful birds. And anyway, I landed on this. I think it's an eastern blue jay, and I was like, yes, I'm going with this because I love the blue. So these are definitely more true blues, versus like more Tiffany blues that I typically color with. But I love these anyway. I love them just the same. So when we're adding shading to things, we've talked about this before. It's any point where two things meet or where one lays on top of the other. So when coloring a bird, we have to pay attention very much to how the wings are laying. So this one's wings are back over its body, which means its body is going to be much darker. But then you also have multiple layers of wings, and we need to add shading into those multiple layers as well. And then you have further wings that are in its tail that also need to have, some shading in between. Don't overthink it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do want to add some darker colors in order to make sure that you have dimension, if that's the look you're going for. You'll also notice that I have left some white areas, and that white area will be taken up by my highlight, which is my lightest color, but there's not a lot of it. So you're not going to have a lot of dark in your shadows, and you're not going to have a lot of highlights. Your midtones are what you'll see the most of. And I am going to show you the coloring of both birds. And then their beaks, in this case, are black. So we'll be shading those as well before we move on to the magnolia trees. So anyway, Amy and I were always together. And then there was like a handful. They were all boys. Like, that's just what our development was made of. So there was like a handful of boys. And so there were 3 brothers that we used to hang out with. And then there was Kevin, and he also had 2 brothers, but his brothers were younger, so we didn't really hang out with his brothers. The other 2, the youngest one was just a little younger than us, but the middle child was our age, and of course he always had to bring his little brother along because them's are the parents' rules, right? Like, if you have a younger sibling, you have to bring them along, and you're responsible for them. So anyway, me, Amy, Kevin, who I will add, my husband's going to laugh so hard because he says every story I tell starts with this guy I dated. So anyway, I was in like 6th grade. I don't know. Kevin was my little boyfriend. Okay. What did that mean? That I held his hand and I helped him with his newspaper route. That's what that meant in 6th grade. I was 12, whatever. But anyway, Kevin was my little boyfriend. And so, it had been raining. It was like in spring. I think we were on spring break, and that creek that we were forbidden to go to was flooded. It was absolutely flooded. And so of course we go back there. We're totally not supposed to be back there. And they decide they're going to go like tubing on the creek, which is completely flooded. This is a terrible idea. terrible, terrible idea. I can recognize it for how dangerous it is. I did not go tubing. I was merely a witness to the situation. So we start at our house, and our development is like off of a main road. So the creek goes all the way down to the main road. No, you know what? We had to have been on spring break because it was a Monday. You know how I know it was a Monday? It was a Monday because my dad had to bowl. That's how I remember. Oh my gosh. So anyway, we're forbidden to go to the creek. I was told by my father very strictly that I had to be home by 5:30 because he had to go bowling. Okay? Now, if you ever met my dad, you would know being on time is something that's very important to him. Something even more important to him is bowling. Okay, that's how my parents met. They bowl. They still bowl to this day. They bowl. That was just like their thing. So anyway, I have to be home so he can go bowling. I cannot make this man late. We go to the creek where we're not supposed to go. They're tubing, which we're not supposed to be doing. All of this is a recipe for bad. And so Amy, I told you she was a tomboy. She's tubing with the boys. Kevin, my little boyfriend's hanging out with me. And so they're like in and out of the rapids, like on parts, like they couldn't get through. They would walk up, on the like the side, like the grassy side of it, the bank. Wow, that was, a word was eluding me. Anyway, the bank of it, where Kevin and I were kind of walking. Not that there was much of a bank, because I told you it was flooded. So anywho, we get down to like where the main road is, which is probably about a 10-15 minute walk from my actual house. Let's talk about the coloring again. So you saw we did the shading for the trees. There are really no leaves in this, but I did want to include some just to kind of break up the pink. So I really just picked parts of like the smaller flowers and made them leaves. I took some creative license. I feel okay with it. So anyway, we make it all the way down there, and it's bad here. There's like lots of rocks and like little waterfalls, and they're tubing down it. And Robbie, who is the youngest, this is the youngest brother. Greg was in charge of him. He was supposed to be watching him. That's his younger brother. He like goes over the edge and like down under the water and pops back up, and he is like trying to keep himself afloat and discover, like, we get him up and we discover that he has completely gashed open his leg, like bad, like stitches bad. Don't mind my dogs barking. They also enjoy my story time. I'm kidding. My husband's probably home. Anyway, so we like get him up out of this creek. We're like half carrying him, and we're right at the entrance to the development, like where it comes in off the main road. He cannot walk. And so we have to flag down a like stranger there's no cell phones. There's nothing. And he lived further into the development than I did. So if it's like 10-15 minutes for me, it was 20 for him. And so we flag down this stranger and tell them the situation. They also have no cell phone, right? Because that's just the time we live in. And so Greg and his brother get into the car with this stranger, and he does drive them home. So happy ending all around. We'll come back to story time. So what you just saw me do was the pink and white magnolias. And so for those, I just added the shading really to kind of like the centers. For these magnolias, I'm going to do them kind of the deeper pink. And honestly, these ones, I like this version better, but I wanted to show you both of them. But here, because most of these magnolias are very cupped, your darkest shading is going to be at the base where they're meeting, and then where the petals are kind of laying over top of each other, and then just work out towards your lightest color. And you're only going to leave just a little bit of the lightest color as your highlight to get that dimension. So you don't need a lot of dark. You don't need a lot of light. Everything is the same for all of the coloring. We're mostly going to see the midtones. So anywho, so now they take off in the car. And like I said, the stranger did take them home, and so Robbie could go get stitches. Me, Amy, who lives next door to me, and my little boyfriend Kevin are now walking home. Do you know what time it is? I don't know what time it is, but I guarantee you it was after 5:30. Oh, yes, it was. Because as I was coming down the street, so was my father. My father was coming down the opposite side of the street. He's coming down, he's in his nice pants and his little polo shirt, and he's smelling like aqua velva, and I have made the man late for bowling. True story. So I can't even, he is so incensed that I dare make him late. I can't even explain to him that we had this emergency in which we had to flag down a stranger, because he is already yelling at me. He's already yelling at me in front of my little boyfriend. I was so embarrassed I was going to die. So Kevin turns tail and starts walking the other way. Amy just like starts lagging behind as my dad has me by the arm and he's like dragging me down the street. So I'm horrified that this is happening in front of all of the neighbors. And then I don't even know where my mother went, but she had Kimberly, my sister, in the car. And so as I am as I am being dragged down the street by my arm by my father while he is just absolutely berating me, here comes my mom in like our tan Oldsmobile, and she's like doing maybe 5 miles an hour down the street, has her window down, and she's like yelling, "John, what did she do?" My dad's trying to explain to my mother. Kimberly's just awkwardly walking from the back seat like, "Oh my gosh, Kelly's in so much trouble," and I'm just being drugged down the street. And that's the story of the creek. That's the story of the creek stranger. Good times. Moral of the story: I shouldn't have made my dad late for bowling. So anywho, back to the coloring. So now that all the coloring is done, I did go back in with a white gel pen, oftentimes with birds, which is very hard for me to achieve. And so I found a little bit of a cheat, is leaving in those white areas that kind of they have in their feather patterns. And so the way that I have found to get around doing that is just by adding it back in with a gel pen. I'm not making completely solid lines. I'm kind of letting the pen skip how it would like to, and I found that that's kind of the most natural way to put in that highlight. Super love the way that that came out. And then I'm going to add some glitter to the flowers because I love a little shimmer. And then really the panels are completely done. Oh, I did also add a little bit. I went over, there's already a highlight in the eye of the bird, but I just kind of made that a little stronger. And then I added a highlight to the top of their beaks. So here is my 2 panels. I am using the picket fence foam tape, and I will be using, along with that, my Gina K Connect glue. That liquid glue, thanks to you guys, you taught me this, gives us a little bit of wiggle room because this foam tape is so sticky. Like once you touch it down, you're in trouble if you have no liquid glue. And then thankfully, which was a kind of like a happy accident, because I had previously laid the panel down when I was doing the ink blending, I could very lightly see the corners of where I needed to match it up. So that actually made it a whole lot easier. So then once these are on, then both cards are done. So you'll have to let me know if you like the pink and white or the pink flowers better, and if you plan on trying to try out this stamping technique. So otherwise, the Gina K release is live. I would encourage you to head over and check it out. It's a really good one. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.